Alright, so this is something I've been meaning to do for a long time. I've been meaning to sort of start posting reviews and more details about some of the interesting guitars in my collection for the sake of keeping sort of a video diary on things because there's going to come a point where I will no longer be able to remember the guitars that I currently have because I have a lot of them. And so this one just arrived in the mail a couple of days ago, and took a while for it to get made. It was very special. This is a Baldacci Guitars custom 8-string that was built to my specs, and it has a bit of an interesting story. So this was, I sent in my specs, and this is a design that I had came up with a lot of the details for, where for my band of the last year and a half, Enthusia, sort of a progressive death metal band, I had been needing something with as much versatility as possible, and to really be able to bring one guitar when I normally use many very different guitars. And so what this is my idea of what a Stratocaster should be, because I've had a lot of bad experiences with Stratocasters over the years, whether it be quality control or general discomfort issues or anything like that, or straight up just having terrible sound quality, because a lot of those things are actually quite bad. And so this took a long time where Connor and I had texted back and forth trying to spec out what we'd make this build be, and it's got some interesting features to it. Well, so let's get into that. Chief of which, it's a little bit odd to see on an electric guitar. We couldn't source a piece of ebony large enough for an 8-string 27-inch scale length fretboard, and so we had to wait in line for the Richlight factory. And so this is the first and only guitar, electric guitar specifically, that I have seen with a Richlight fretboard, which is a little bit intriguing, as it certainly feels a little bit different to some of the ebony fretboards that I have, which is, it's certainly not a negative thing. I love how pure black that thing is. I don't know if my camera's going to pick this up nicely, but we decided to go with a Roman numerals on the inlays, which I thought was pretty cool, because I hadn't seen that before, and I have seen a lot of guitars over the years. And one thing that I was really excited about with this particular build is these are Dimarzio Ionizers, and I'm a Dimarzio kind of guy. I've played every single kind of pickups out there, and I hate most of them, especially like the new Fishmans that exist where everyone is playing Fishman these days. I think that those sound atrocious. I would take pretty much, I think I was wording it to my friend the other day as, I would rather be using first act underwounds that aren't grounded correctly than anything Fishman related, just because there is such a lack of character to them. And so I have been really wanting to get my hands on this set of Dimarzios, because I want to get my hands on all of the rare Dimarzios. This is Tosinabasi's signature set, which then has been discontinued for quite a while. And so it took a while to figure out where we could source them from. And it turned out a whole lot better than I could have possibly expected. And there's a couple, of course, what's important to me is I demand that my guitars are through necks. I do not like to play any guitar that is not a through neck, just because I like the additional durability and sustain that you get from having it be a single piece. Also, it's really cool to show people that don't play guitar when you go, this thing was made from one piece of wood. And with that in mind, one thing that particularly impressed me about this build is the headstock is not a separate piece. So we got a 2-piece maple neck with a 4-piece maple body. As in, I really like my maple for everything from guitars to syrup. And what excited me is that it is all CNC'd, those pieces together, so that headstock is the same piece of wood. So we could put an absurd amount of stress down on that headstock, and it's not going to crack or go anywhere. I believe I had worded this to one of my dear friends as, if you were to drop this guitar on the ground, you'd have to worry about the ground breaking, because it feels as strong as something's going to get, which is important to me because I have a lot of guitars that have fallen apart on me or failed partway through playing places all over the place. And so with that being said, what I had really wanted out of this guitar was to have one guitar to use with that band, because quite often when I'm playing with Enthusia, I'll bring in like 3 or 4 guitars with me, which is no fun at all, because then I keep them all set up and tuned exactly the same way. Every single one of my guitars, action set as low as it can go, and all in E standard because I'm using a Kemper profiler to change my sounds. But with that being said, I needed something that I could do my weird slap stuff to, play all my leads, do the low chugs, when that's needed. And this does all of that. There will be better sound files of it in the future because I haven't actually really bothered doing much recording with it yet. But the sound quality of this thing is a whole lot better than I could have possibly expected. Like, I just expected to receive it and be like, that's a pretty good guitar. And I'm glad that I paid for it, but it was like, oh, this thing is actually quite amazing. And so what I'm really excited for when I'm playing with this thing in the future is that I'll only have to bring one guitar with me all over the place. What I often do, like when I'm playing at my church, is I will tune a lot of my 7-string guitars as if they're 8 strings, and then I'll bar my chords like this, so that then I can play, let's say, a G major, but I'm holding notes for that G major in the bass an octave down, so I can play multiple instruments at a time, being both the bass and the guitar at the same time. And I can do some slap on the low end to really accent that this is something different from what people are used to hearing. One thing that's kind of intriguing to me is with the tonal quality of this instrument. Well, being that it's made of maple, it's nice and bright with a whole lot of clarity and sustain to it. But something magical had happened where I had no clue, and I hadn't even watched reviews for the ionizers. I've watched a couple of comparison videos or anything like that. But with the ionizers, the bridge pickup, that's a nice Dimarzio bridge pickup and all, which I love. But then the neck pickup is something really exciting. And so this neck pickup, super, super high output with a whole lot of clarity to it, a really, really tight low end, and oh wow. I picked up this guitar expecting you'd mainly play it for some heavier metal kind of things. And I've spent maybe 10% of the time that I've had it plugged in with it on the bridge pickup. All the rest of it has been clean tones on the neck pickup, just because I love that sound so much. And of course, with guitars like this, I always have coil splits in there so I can get the single coil sounds out of things. And the single coil sound in that neck pickup is phenomenal. Although for me, I know on my clean tones, it's normally like neck and neck single coil. Very rarely will I ever use the bridge pickup by itself, especially the bridge single coil. To me is absolutely a useless sound. Now, what for me I mainly use my guitars for is that middle position, since I'm the only guitar player in my bands, and then I often go into both single coils in that middle position, for which I find have a little bit more percussive elements to it, and I like that a lot. And so one of the other things that's pretty important when we're talking about particularly a high-end guitar is how it looks. And so this was something that I was really excited to be able to get something spec'd out in just the colors that I want and that kind of thing. And so with my company, we did a bunch of laser engraving for it. It's hard to pick up on camera, but we laser engraved a spiderweb pattern into the top before sending that down to Baldacci in Arizona. And then we also did the pick guard specific for this guitar in our black leather pattern that we really like. And then that led to something intriguing. When it was getting finished down in Arizona, one thing that they decided to do, which I think that Baldacci did a great job at this, is rather than leaving the laser engraving holes empty, they decided to sand it down so that then just the pattern could be visible, but without there being any texture to it. So with the satin finish and all, it looks like that's all part of it in the first place. And I think that's pretty cool, because you don't see laser engraved tops on guitars very often at all, let alone ones where it looks like it's naturally part of the wood, which is something that I found to be great and very, very unique. So I'm looking forward to this years into the future, looking back at it. And so then the next thing that I wanted to talk about on here was the playability of it. And of course, I always opt for stainless steel frets whenever that's possible, because that makes things more good. And so with this, it took quite a bit of setting up, and it's going to take plenty more setting up as it's a dual truss rod design, so I can really get in there and adjust it to what I see fit. and it plays fantastically. Not as good about some of my other guitars, but it sounds better than my other guitars, so I don't really care at the end of the day. And with that in mind, one thing that's important to me when I'm talking about guitars, when presenting people guitars or anything like that, is sort of having this shock factor, this thing to it. And so I like when I go to some place and I pull my guitar out of the case and people are like, dude, that's a sick guitar. And that's really what a lot of people care about in today's market, is people being able to be like, that thing, I want to hear it because that looks like it means me in business there. And like this looks like it's going to do something cool. It sort of reminds me a lot of the Ibanez Universe, which is something that I sort of wanted it to bring to mind. Just sort of having the sort of not particularly exciting top to it or anything like that, but then just having this massive clarity and huge sound that comes from it. And so then one thing that leads on to my next point is like when you show someone a really cool guitar, or you're a guitar player or anything like that, then they will bring forward to mind, like, are they going to remember this guitar? Are they going to, because quite often I chat with so many players and I can't remember their names, but I can remember their guitars, unless if their guitar is really boring. And there's a lot of really boring guitars out there, unfortunately. And this is the kind of instrument that you look at and you don't forget it. That is an unforgettable design. And so with this, I like to have like loads of weird knobs and switches that do random things that have differences in quality and value to the overall instrument. But on this particular one, we decided to keep it simple with just the master volumes and the two toe knobs and the splits on there with the three-way switch, because I have had a lot of light electronics on different builds just sort of fail a lot, and there will be additional videos on that in the future with different companies that may or may not have done what they're supposed to do correct, and things that I may or may not have done correct. And one thing that was intriguing to me, that I had no clue about with this design, is like coming into my collection, I expected it to be the heaviest guitar in my collection, and it probably is, but only by a little bit. I have an Ibanez St, which is currently getting work on, and I've been meaning to do a video on that guitar because it is very quirky and interesting. And that St is a little bit of a thicker maple body than this, and so they weigh about the same, probably about 9 pounds, 14 ounces or so, which doesn't make it like ultra heavy, but you certainly do notice it. But what is more notable in terms of how comfortable the instrument is, this thing has a wider body, or the height when it's on your leg, which to me, as someone who's 6'2", that is pretty nice to have, because then I don't have to slouch as much to play it. I tuck my knee up underneath me, and when I'm playing it, it's just at the right height, which on some of the nicest guitars in my collection, they're little skinny baby guitars, and I do not like that one bit. And that's the reason that I have a couple right in front of me here that are kind of awful, and I don't particularly intend on playing much in the future. And then that leads to my next important point, at least to me here, is with the practicality of it. Like, I completely wanted this instrument to be as surprisingly simple, yet having a lot of depth of character to it. And with one thing that really helps with that is on this thing we've got these super nice hip shot open gear locking tuners, and so that is critical for keeping a guitar in tune when you're doing all this wailing on it and bending those strings something fierce. And I can't get this guitar to go out of tune just with the quality that everything is. When you have a neck through guitar with locking tuners that's set up correctly, you're not going to get it to go out of tune. It's just not going to happen. You really have to do something silly with it in order to get that to have any issues whatsoever. And as far as the overall quality is, I've hardly ever seen any guitar that comes close at any price, because you can pick up any guitar off the wall and look at the thing close enough, and you will find blemishes on it. There is no such thing as a perfect build with perfect build quality to it. Doesn't matter what the instrument is or what the item is as a whole. If something that is made at least partially by hand, will have mistakes that were made. Like with my car, when I was checking out some of the wiring due to issues with it, I could see that just the wiring harnesses were these absolute monstrosities, or there's plugins that actually don't do anything and that sort of thing. But like on here, there's a couple of little parts where there was little scratches and whatnot, which is part of it being laser engraved. That there was just things needed to be tested and looked at in different ways. So this is just a quirk specific to this guitar and not Baldacci's actual output. And I've experienced and looked at many of their guitars, and they are honestly among the best I've ever seen, if not the best. And that brings me a lot of joy to have one that's this custom and special from them. And so then one thing I actually I've got a note sheet in front of me here with the things I was going to say. And I left this other category just to the others because I wanted to give it sort of a Doug score at the end of the day, but that would require me actually doing math, and I don't feel like doing that. I haven't had my caffeine yet. And with that, there's this thing, I'm just so impressed with it. Just everything about it just feels right. It was the guitar that I designed and wanted to have added to my collection, and I do intend on keeping it for many years. Like, of course, there isn't enough information on a brand like Baldacci yet to be like, oh, this thing is definitively going to have an amazing retail value in the future. But I certainly hope that it will, although this one's mine and no one's going to have it because it's cool. And so that's about all. I was thinking about I could add in some audio clips of it, and then I have to do some editing, and I don't feel like doing that today. I'm going to also film videos on a lot of other guitars in my collection. Probably the ones I want to talk about and have positive things to say, because there's ones I don't have particularly nice things to say about, and I spend quite a bit of money on those things. And yeah, that's all I have to say about this guitar. So for now, it's going to be played on all of my bands in the future. So yeah, thank you.